Hey everybody, my name is Alex, and in this video we are doing part 5 of our Ultimate Autonomous Guide. So, we're finally going to start plotting. We should have our node running, we should have the drives prepped. You can confirm that. Let me actually make sure I have uh, my terminal set to be shown here. Oh, alright, it is off the screen. And let me make it a little bit bigger here. So if I do df-h, I have this dev SDA, that is my farm. You should have something a little similar. Spoiler alert, I've already plotted this. I was testing out the GPU plotter. It's released, so it's like an experimental build. Nazar uh, posted a link to it, and I have a guide up for it on the YouTube channel and in Substack. But it is like not optimized, and Nazar has been very clear that like it's not the official release. So you're welcome to try it out, but don't expect, amazing efficiency and everything to be working perfectly. So anyways, I did already plot, I was able to plot this whole 2 TB drive with a RTX 3070 pretty quickly. But the point is, you need to have your farm drives mounted and ready to go. And we'll start by just creating the network. So for me, okay, so we're gonna do the first scenario, which is creating the stack for a separate cluster and node. So as you know, I have my node on a separate computer, and I'm going to deploy just the farmer cluster on Bender. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just paste in the command to create the network in Docker. So if you get that UUID, or not UUID, container ID, or network ID actually, that means you are good to go. You can check it in Portainer if you want. And then we need to create a couple folders. These are going to be folders that we will mount in Docker in our stack file. So we're going to make a parent directory called, and I use the little, is it the tilde? Is tilde the word? I don't know. The little squiggly line slash, that means like we're creating it in our home directory. And I'm going to do autonomous underscore cluster. That's going to be like my parent folder. And then I'm going to create 3 folders underneath it. I don't know why that wouldn't work. Home, Hake hardware, autonomous cluster, controller, no such file address. I don't know why it wouldn't make the controller directory, but oh, you know what? I gotta update my guide here. It should be, there wasn't a make dir right here after the and sign. This is why I test out my guides before I publish them, although I'm sure there's still some errors. Okay, we got the folders created, and now we need to create a config file for NATs. So we have 3 folders, cache, and that's going to be where your cache is stored. It's going to be like a 100 GB file, the piece cache. Then we have controller. There's just some files like an identity.bin or something that gets put in there. And then NATs, we need to just put a config file in there. So we'll do cd into NATs, and we'll just do nano nats.config. And it's very simple. We're just pasting in this max payload equals 2 megabytes. Control X, and then Y, and then enter to save the file. And we can just go back a directory. Actually, we can go back all the way to the home directory. And the only thing we need to do now is just change the ownership. Because if you remember with like mounting the drives, we need to change the ownership for the Docker containers to access them correctly to nobody and no group. So I'm going to paste in a command here. So sudo change ownership, -R, nobody, no group, and then we're doing every folder and file in the Autonomous cluster parent folder. So if I do ls-l Autonomous cluster, we can see everything is no group, nobody. So now our Docker container should be able to access these when we do a bind mount. And a bind mount is basically mounting a system folder into our container instead of like an internal volume that we create. And that is all we need to do in our terminal. So we can go back to our browser, and I don't know why this browser window got resized a little bit here. There we go, that's the right width, and that is a good enough height. All right, perfect. So we've done this section, we've gotten to the part where we have nobody, no group. And now we're going to start building our stack file. So I split it up into sections, but I also made a GitHub here. If I go to repositories, autonomous files, this farmer cluster is going to be the full stack file. I've added some additional notes here. Update your time zone, make sure the image is updated to the latest. All of that is called out in the guide. So make sure your volumes path matches path to your controller folder, because in here we're doing the fully qualified. And actually real quick, so you're going to need to be in this stack file, you're going to be doing a bind mount. So you're going to be mounting it to a system folder. If you're not sure the full path, because we've been doing the little tilde or asterisk squiggly line thing, you can go into your terminal and you can cd into like Autonomous and then like cache, for instance. You can do pwd, so print working directory, and that'll give you the full URL that you want to use when you're doing the bind mount. So we'll start at let's go into Bender, and we're going to do stacks. This one just needs to be removed. Yeah, Bender, remove that. I was testing. Then we'll do add stack. And I'm going to do autonomous cluster for the name. And then we're going to start pasting in from here. So the first thing we're going to do is copy the nats section. I'm actually going to close this and then paste it in. So in this first section, there's a few things we need to talk about. We need to update this path to the nats.config file so that it reflects your working directory. So likely you're going to just need to change this Hake hardware to your username. And then we're just a few things to call out. We're setting a static IP address internally on the autonomous network that we created so that we know the IP address for where NATS is going to be. And you're going to see in every single service that we put in here after, it's going to reference NATS at this IP address. And then we've talked about this before, but labels, I would recommend keeping these in here and just putting in a human-friendly name for your container, because if you use spaceport, and we're going to have a whole section on that, you'll see that this name gets pulled in, and it's a lot more friendly than like just autonomous nats for the container name, because you're kind of limited on how you name your containers. But for labels, you can put it in a way that it's a little bit more readable. So it's really up to you. You can delete it, it's not required, but I prefer to keep it in. Okay, the next section, now we're going to actually be doing a autonomous container. So we're just going to go, I do usually do like an enter. So there's some white space between the services, and then just put the cursor all the way to the left and just paste it in. And now you have the next service in here. So it's the farmer controller, autonomous controller. September 3rd is the latest image, so that's the one I'm using. Make sure you update your bind mount to the correct path. You can see here we're specifying the NAT server, and that's just the IP address that we put up here. Now, and then the base path. So if you're not too familiar with like Docker and bind mounts, basically we're mounting this system folder to an internal folder inside Docker of /controller, inside this container to /controller. That's why down here, when we're referencing the base path, we just do /controller. So remember, left side is like your actual system file system, and the right side is the container file system. So we're mounting the left side to the right side, similar to like how we mount the drives in the other section, where we're kind of like just letting this Docker image access the /controller like we would a disk when we mounted it to a folder on our file system. And then you need to put in the actual IP address of your node. So in this example, the node is running on an entirely separate computer, and that's why we're going to have like a different IP address, because right now the IP address for Bender is not the same as the IP address for where I have my node. So that's why we're specifying exactly where the node is. And then labels, you can update that. Environment, you can update that. And we don't have to, but we're going to specify a static IP address for our controller, just for consistency. We can scroll down to the next section. Again, give yourself a little bit of white space, paste in the next service. And now we have Autonomys cache, latest image version. We're doing another bind mount. We're doing, okay, so now, again, we're specifying the NAT server. This shouldn't change. It should be the same for every single service that you run. And then for labels, I put Bender cache. Oh yeah, path. So this part should stay the same. And you typically want at least 100 gigabytes of cache. You can do a little bit more. Some people do 110. Some people do 200. I don't necessarily know if there's a noticeable difference, but you do want to have it probably more than 100 gigabytes because I think it's downloading like or putting a lot of the blockchain history in the cache, and that helps with plotting. So if your cache is too small, it doesn't work well. But I don't really have any metrics to say like what the best size is. So start with 100, and maybe you'll see in the Discord other people trying out different sizes to see if it's faster or slower. Okay, next we have the environment. You can update that to whatever you want. And then the network. So just put my cursor back here for the next one. We're going to do the actual farmer. Now this is where you're going to probably have to do a bit of work. Okay, so we're doing the farmer, Autonomous farmer, latest version. Now, I only have one disk. You might have multiple. So if you have more than one, you would just copy this, go to the next line and paste it in, and then change it to like farm one. And you would do that as many times as you need to for all your farms. Now I only have one, so I'm going to keep it at one. NAT server, same IP address. You want to put in your reward address. So since I'm actually going to be deploying this, I want to put in my reward address here. And then for every disk, again, you're going to need to put in a path. So I only have one, so I have one here, but if I had a second, I would put a comma, go to the next line, and then paste this in, and then make sure to update the path. So if this was farmer one up here, then I would make sure to put farm one down here along with the size. So maybe this is maybe a 3.7 terabyte drive, but I only have one. So I'm going to delete these out. Time zone, label, static IP address. Okay, let's skip a line and get ready to paste in the last one. Well, we have one more section, but this is the last service, the plotter. So just like everything else, make sure you have the latest version. We're going to have nats, plotter, update the time zone, update the label or delete it, and assign a static IP address. Lastly, we're going to set networks, autonomous network external. So we're basically just bringing in the network that all of these services will use that we created earlier. And this should be enough to get everything going. Now, I can guarantee you there's probably going to be some error that occurs because getting all this right like on the first try is actually pretty difficult. But almost always you can use the logs to figure out what's going on. So let's just deploy the stack and see what happens. Okay, everything seems to be good. Let's check the cache. Cache has been created, so that's good. Let's check the controller. Farm initialized successfully, so discover the new farm. Everything looks good for this. Farmer, okay, everything looks good on this. 1.6 TB bytes, 1.8 terabytes like I specified. Farm 0, so that looks good. Nats is just going to say servers ready. And then plotter. Now it's going to take him a while before you start seeing plot requests come in because typically the controller is going to have to create the piece cache before it starts plotting. I don't know if it has to create the entire piece cache, but I think it has to create at least some of the piece cache before it can start plotting. So as you can see, it's starting to initialize the piece cache. Synchronizing the piece cache, this can take a long time. Like we're talking a couple hours. So just hold tight and we'll have to just see like when it starts plotting. I'll see if I can like notice if it starts plotting before the piece cache is completed, but likely it's going to be a minute before. You might see like some plot requests come in before, but it might not actually start plotting. So again, don't worry if it doesn't start plotting right away. Wait till your piece cache, and you're going to see in the controller, it'll start printing out a percent here, like 0.00%, 0.05%, and you'll just keep checking for it to be completed. So that's really it. The most common issues, oh, and here's a link to that GitHub repository if you want to check it out. So if you just want to copy and paste it into like an IDE, sometimes like opening up in Visual Studio Code is like easier to edit in there than um, paste into Portainer all as one. But yeah, the most common issues are you put a path in incorrectly somewhere. So always double check your paths and permissions are not set correctly. So always make sure that you've set your permissions correctly. And sometimes you set your path incorrectly, but it gives you a permissions error because it's like trying to edit something that doesn't exist, or it's trying to like create the folder, but it can't because it doesn't have the permissions. So just always, as step one, check the permissions. It should be owned by nobody, no group, and that the path is correct. And that's it. So at this point, let's see what we got. Okay, so you can see the piece cache is starting to sync, and it's going to take a little while. You can see it's, 20 seconds between each 0.1%. So luckily I have saved you can copy, you typically only have one cache on your network, but for me, I backed up my piece cache, so I'm just going to copy it over, and then we'll be good. But I want to see, does it start looking like it's plotting? Okay, it does look like it's going to wait until my piece cache is like more synced before it starts plotting. So anywho, that's going to be it for this video. What do we have in the next video? I'm not too sure, but I think we're going to get into maybe spaceport. Oh, you know what? I didn't go over if you're putting it all in one. So let's go to, so in this case, if you've already done your node, like I have my node on Johnny 5, I've got my autonomous node here. What you can do is open up the editor, and I have it set so that all you need to do is like come in here, and because NAT starts at 172.25.101, and in here you did your node at 172.25.100, there's no overlapping IP address, so what you can do is start down at your plotter, copy all your plotter, copy all the way up to NATs, and you could even do this in a separate, yeah, let's do it. Let's keep the node separate from the stack file or the other stack file. So let's go to stacks and we'll do add stack and we'll do autonomous cluster. And you can just copy this whole file. And what you're going to want to do is literally the exact same thing, except when you're in your controller, you're going to want to change it to 100. So now because they're on the same network, you'll be able to just put in the static IP address that we set for our node. So hopefully that makes sense, but if you're just running everything on one and you're still running a cluster, you can do that and just put in for the node RPC the static IP address, but you have to make sure that it's deploying both on the same network. So if we go into here, we can see the autonomous node is on the autonomous network and it's 172.25.100. Again, we're on the autonomous network. We're importing that in here. And the IP address is 172.25.0.100. And 944 is the port, and that's because we've exposed, well, you're on the same network, so you don't even need to necessarily expose that port, but that is the port that it uses for like the external connections. So almost forgot that. Glad I remembered, or else I'd be redoing this video. So yeah, if you're putting everything on one computer, you just create another stack file on the same environment, and you're good to go. All right, I will see you in the next video where I think we're going to start going over like how to monitor your setup. So I'll see you in the next one.